Cha-ching! Hey guys, in my last video, I ripped out the old transom core. Now it's time to put the new one in. I'm sorry for the longer video, but there's a lot to show. The hull relaxed a bit when I cut out the old floor, so the first thing I did was use a ratchet strap to pull it back to its original measurement, and I made sure it was level. I bought some 3/4 inch Okum plywood for the transom and stringers. It was more than I wanted to spend, but it's very high quality material. I used the popsicle stick stencil to trace out the transom and clamping board. Then I used the router to clean up the edges so they matched perfectly. I bought 6 gallons of Rocca's non-blushing epoxy to start this project. It's good quality stuff, but I'm having some challenges that I'll talk about in a bit. I glued the transom together using thickened epoxy and a notched applicator. I used a few straight 2x4s in my sawhorses, since the floor isn't flat here. Clamps, screws, and weights added enough pressure so it bonded well. The transom boards bonded strong and very flat. After a quick sanding, I primed the back of the new core with epoxy. This really is some of the nicest Okum plywood I think I've ever used. Okay, here's a quick tip. If there's something you don't want to bond to your epoxy, just wrap it in clear packing tape so that it won't stick. I did a prime coat on the fiberglass skin. This is to ensure a good bond and take care of any exposed fibers from grinding the old glass. Using an assortment of clamps, bolts, and shims, I installed the new core with more thickened epoxy. The major challenge here was getting it all spread out and clamped down before the epoxy sets up too much. This really would go much better with an extra set of hands. Once it's set up, I filled in the gaps around the edges with more structural putty. Looking around back, the holes I covered up with packing tape have mostly filled up, telling me the thickened epoxy spread out and bonded well. Looking along the top edge of the transom, you can really see how uneven the fiberglass was cut from the factory. I used a straight 2x4 as my guide to help level out the top of the transom. This will play into the design later on in the build. Using my grinder and fiber discs, I trimmed down the top edge of the transom so that it is even with the gunnels. I also cleaned up the uneven fiberglass and then finished filling in the holes in the plywood. Using my grinder and an assortment of sanders, I then profiled and prepared the wood for the fiberglass. On a side note, that little half-inch battery-powered belt sander is very handy, and I highly recommend getting one to save you some frustration. She's all profiled and smoothed out the way I wanted. Next step is to lay some epoxy fillets and then fiberglass. I switched to my preferred mix for fillets and readied up a batch. Here's where my issues started with the resin. It was almost 100 degrees in the shop that day, and the mix was heating up and starting to gel before I could even lay it down. Instead of a smooth mix, it was more like working with Play-Doh. It took a bit longer, but I was able to make it work by using smaller batches. I laid out and cut most of my glass. Unfortunately, the guys at Rocca were less than gentle when folding my biaxial cloth, but I was able to make it work. I prime coated the plywood. I used a heat gun to slightly warm up the edges for better penetration. I'll touch on that subject in a later video. I'm using a combination of 17-ounce biaxial and 6-ounce woven cloth. Each area is getting a strategic amount of fiberglass. The joint where the transom and clamping board meet will get just a few layers of 6-ounce woven, because in my experience the biaxial doesn't like to make sharp S-curves, and I don't like air bubbles. You'll notice I have two paint trays stacked up to hold the resin. That's because I put an ice pack in between them to try and extend the work time of the epoxy. This works okay at best. The resin was still getting hot enough to kick fairly quickly. So the better solution again was to use smaller batches. Ultimately, I'll have to order a different hardener to match the temperature. The glass is set, and the transom is not only very solid, but more level and flatter than the factory. Some might be thinking they would have done heavier glass, but keep in mind I still have to tie in the stringers, transom knees, and the deck. Those structures and the additional fiberglass that is associated with them will add an amazing amount of strength to the transom. I'll post some more updates soon. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons. And if you have any comments or questions, please leave them below. Thanks for watching.
Cha-ching!